Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Asatara Satyasri Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Mathura Dhama Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nima Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesa Sannivadi Paskatyade Satarane. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahavana Bhagavatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Vanchakalpajubhischa Vipasindhavyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it is 24th of October 2022 in Hillsborough, North Carolina. We're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10. Chapter 39, text 49 to 50. I want to actually do the word for word first, because I'd like us to be meditating on the meaning of each word as we're chanting the verses. And I'd also like for all of us to chant both the verses. And I know many times when we have two, we just chant one. But I'd like us to really meditate on these words and to chant both of them if that's okay. Okay, so let's do the word for word first. Brihat, large. So everyone should know that, right? We have the term Brihat Mridanga, beating the big mridanga, which means the printing press, big drum. Katitata, whose loins, shroni, and hips, karaba, like an elephant's trunk, uru, of thighs. And we have the word, when I was studying Sanskrit, I remember one of the ways they taught us was by having us do exercises with Sanskrit instructions. So I always remember these body parts, like touch your thighs, touch your nose, touch your toes. Dwaya, a pair, which reminds us of the English word dual. Anvitam, having. Charu, attractive. Janu yugam, whose 2 knees. So Janu means knees, and yuga is a pair. Yes, we often have this word yugala priti, right? So the pair of knees. Charu, again, attractive. Janga, of shanks. That's the calves of the feet. Yugala, again, a pair. Samyutam, having. Tunga, high. Gupta, whose ankles. Aruna, reddish. And this is a word you see very frequently as applied to Krishna. His eyes are reddish, like palms and soles of are reddish. Aruna also can mean the sunrise. Nakavrata, from whose toenails. Now, naka we also say, right, every day in the prayer to sing it. So naka is nails, can mean fingernails or toenails. Diti bihi, with effulgent rays. Vritam, surrounded. We also have that word in the Dhammadarastaka, right? About how Krishna's curly hair is surrounding his lotus-like face. Nava, soft. Now, nava can also mean young, new, fresh. Anguli angusta, the 2 big toes and other toes. Now, anguli can mean either toes or fingers. Dalai, like flower petals. Vilasat, glowing. Pada pankajam, whose lotus feet. So pada means feet, panka means mud, jam means birth. So pankaja means born from mud, which is a way of saying lotus. There's also ambuja, born from water. So again, in our Dhammadarastaka prayer, we say, Mukham ambuja. The literally means your face. Mukha also can mean chief, head. Your face, which is born from the water, but it really means your lotus face. So it's a way of saying lotus. You can say lotus kamala or pankaja or ambuja. There's different ways of referring to the lotus. Brahatkati tatashroni karaboru dayanvitam charu janu yugam charu janga yugala samyutam tunga goparuna naka rata di bit rata di tibir vritam navanguli yangusta dalyar vilasat pada pankajam. Okay, VVT translation. So this is the description. So Akura has gone to bathe in the river Yamuna, and there he is seeing the Lord as Narayana. He's seeing the four-handed form of the Lord, and he's seeing Balaram as Sesha. So this is the description of the Lord's form. So yesterday's verse was a description of part of the Lord's form, and this is continuing. It's actually one full Sanskrit sentence, one very, very long Sanskrit sentence from yesterday's verse to today's. He had large loins and hips, thighs like an elephant's trunk, and shapely knees and shanks. Shanks are your calves. His raised ankles reflected the brilliant effulgence emanating from the nails on his petal-like toes, which beautified his lotus feet. So there's no BBT purport. And I'm going to read Jiva Goswami's commentary. His buttocks were like banks, in other words, banks of a river, because of their width. His hips were wide. Karamba means the outer portion of the hand from the wrist to the little finger. This means his thighs were thick and gradually tapered downwards. Words like anvitam and samyutam, endowed with, indicate the great beauty of these limbs. He had tender toes. Anybody remember the word for tender in Sanskrit? Nava, which also means what? New or young, fresh. Pink like a lotus petal. The literal express the petals of his fresh toes indicates their extreme tenderness. Since the description is not always in order, it is understood that his eyes wandered because he was agitated with greed. So often we hear about looking at the Lord's form in a particular order, but he was so desirous that he was just looking all over the place. So I think we can say that all the major religions of the world talk about love of God. Yeah. Right. So there's a very famous story in Judaism. You know, how do you say the meaning of the scriptures while standing on one foot? And the answer is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said the same thing. He said the first commandment is to love the Lord like thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy might. And the second, which is like unto the first, is to love your neighbor as yourself. But how do you love a God you don't know? How do you do that? You know, I sometimes give this example, right? So the young girl comes home to her parents. Mommy, Daddy, I'm in love. I'm in love. Oh, what's the boy's name? I don't know. What does he look like? I don't know. Where does he live? I don't know. What does he do? I don't know, but I love him. I mean, it's insanity. How can you love somebody you don't know? And of course, there are some descriptions of God in various scriptures of the world, but they tend to be very vague. You know, he's merciful. Okay. He's jealous. They often get the jealous. You know, he's jealous and he's angry. And, you know, I've talked to you about this before, how one time I was, actually more than one time, I was given this little Christian tract. You know what a tract is? Like those little booklets. And it shows God as this kind of big, faceless man. I mean, he's got broad shoulders, but he has no face. Looks like he's wearing a business suit with padding on the shoulders, you know. And he's sitting in a throne. And there's this huge screen next to him. This is your life, it says at the top of the screen. And then there's these little ant-like people at the bottom of the throne. And he's showing them what their life was. And then he sends them, you know, you go to heaven, you go to hell. Doesn't sound very lovable to me. Is that very lovable? I mean, you know, a little puppy's more lovable than that. It's just not, it's just, it doesn't really evoke love. It evokes fear, some consternation. And, you know, when we have fear, usually when we have fear, what we try to do is just hide, isn't it? If we're afraid that we're afraid we're going to get in trouble, we just try not to get caught. It's not that we necessarily try to be good. So, to talk of love of God, but if you don't know God, And the first time that I met with Srila Prabhupada was in the summer of 1974 in Chicago. I was already initiated. I'd gotten initiated through the mail. Prabhupada had come for our first Rath Yatra, and my father came and asked, is it all right if I come to the temple even though I have my own religion? He didn't want to just be there like as a tourist. He didn't want to be disrespectful. And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, just like we're in Chicago, and there are many planes going to Chicago, but they have to know that they're going to Chicago. He said, otherwise, what is the use of many planes? He said, any religion that teaches you to know God and to love Him, that is a good religion. So again, how can you love God if you don't know Him? What's going to happen if you talk about love of God, but you don't have any idea of who God is you're going to love other things and call it God. That's what's going to happen. You're going to love your family members, you're going to love your pets, you're going to love nature, and you're going to call that loving God. I forget who it was, some so-called religionist who said service to man is service to God. Now, that can be a fact, that you can serve Krishna by serving other living beings. But serving other living beings is not automatically service to God. Right? Just like when we met Prabhupada in 1976, and our oldest son was just a baby, 1.5, and he was sitting on my lap, and Prabhupada said, just like this mother is loving her son without expectation of return, in the same way one should love Krishna. And my father said, will loving her son help her to love Krishna? And Prabhupada said, no, but loving Krishna will help her to love her son. So it's a fact that if I love God, I will love everyone who God loves, which is everyone. So if I love God, that's demonstrated by loving everyone. But I can't go the other way. I can't just try to give my love to this and that in the world and say that that's love of God. That it just doesn't work that way. It's like if you love your spouse, then you'll at least try to love everyone in your spouse's family. You'll at least try to get along with them for the sake of your spouse. But it's not that you're going to love your spouse by loving your spouse's mother. It doesn't work that way. One has to be first. So we have in the Bhagavatam descriptions of who is God. I mean, people ask me sometimes, why have you taken up Krishna consciousness? And I say, as far as I can understand, that objectively, the Vaishnava theology, and particularly the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, I find to be objectively the highest and most complete in the world. Now, I'm very aware that whatever we like, we consider to be the best. So it may be just that I subjectively like Krishna, and therefore I think it's the best. I'm aware that that might be the case, that there might be something that's objectively better, and it's just my personal taste. At the same time, if we're going to look at what are the basic questions that a theology should answer, who am I? What is the purpose of life? Why is there suffering and evil in the world, which is the only point the atheists have? What happens at death? What is the ultimate reality? Is there an ultimate reality? Is there a God? And who is God? Aren't those the basic questions that a theology should answer? And if the theology can't answer those basic questions, then it's, by definition, it would appear to be an inferior theology. I just can't see how you can get around that. It is true that people in other religious faiths that don't have this knowledge at the ready sometimes get this knowledge revealed to them by the grace of God. That does happen. There are practitioners in other religious traditions that really don't have this kind of knowledge, but it becomes revealed to them. But that seems like a more difficult way to go about it. It's like if you're only in an elementary school, you may understand PhD physics, but it's not what's being taught in the school. Yeah? So I'm thinking that there are some sections of the Bible that kind of hint at what we have here in the Bhagavatam. This is from the Song of Solomon, section 5. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are as the eyes of doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, as sweet flowers. His lips are like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. His hands are as gold rings set with beryl. His belly is as bright ivory overlaid with sapphires. His legs are as pillars of marble, set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. Not different. But if you ask any Bible scholar, oh, Solomon is describing the form of God. No. It is just metaphorical poetry, they'll say. So there's some description there. Like it says in Exodus, Moses spoke with God as a friend speaks with another friend. There's some description there, but they tend to deny it. First of all, there's very little description. It's not very developed, and what's there they deny. Their traditions have been overtaken by impersonalism. And of course, our Vedic traditions also have been attacked by impersonalism in the form of Sankaracharya, who says that all these descriptions of the Lord are also part of illusion. Yes? Unfortunately, in the Vedic tradition, the personalistic schools have also remained very strong, whereas in most of the other traditions of the world, the personalistic aspects of the traditions have become very weak and not really able to assert themselves. So here we have the beauty of the form of the Lord. Krishna Swami was talking the other day how when a devotee said to Prabhupada, can I conquer lust by marriage? And Prabhupada said, yes, you can marry. He said, but the way to conquer lust is to be attracted to the form of the Lord. So these verses here are for our meditation. We're supposed to be meditating on the form of the Lord, especially during kirtan, right? We're having kirtan before the deity during japa. Prabhupada says when you're chanting Hare Krishna, you should be remembering the form of the Lord. And as we're going to talk about at the end, even when we see the aspects of nature, when we see everything around us. So I wanted to go first of all to the third canto. So this is chapter 28, text 21 to 24. And here Lord Kapila Deva, as part of the process of devotional service, gives a meditation on the form of the Lord. So I'm just going to read the verses that describe the same parts of the form that are being described in the verse we're studying today. So starting with text 21, the devotee should first concentrate his mind on the Lord's lotus feet, which are adorned with the marks of a thunderbolt, a goad, a banner, and a lotus. The splendor of their beautiful ruby nails resembles the orb of the moon and dispels the thick gloom of one's heart. So in this verse, Lord Kapila Deva describes Krishna's toenails as what? Anybody remember? Rubies. And also what? Like the orbit of the moon and very bright. And what do they do? What's their effect? Dispel the gloom in the heart. Now in today's verse in the Bhagavatam, any remember how Krishna's toenails were described? His toes were described. What was the word? Nava. Nava means what? New, young, tender, soft. Yeah. So Krishna's walking everywhere, but his feet never get calloused. Even Srila Prabhupada's feet never got calloused or cracked or... But Krishna's feet always stay very soft. If you've ever touched a baby's feet, so little babies, before they start to move around and walk, a little baby's feet, so they feel like butter. Yeah, and Krishna's body is often described like that. So do we ever have gloom in our heart? Who here ever has gloom in their heart? Anyone here ever have gloom in their heart? Am I the only one? You're all too shy to admit you ever have gloom in your heart. So if you ever have gloom in your heart, what can you do? Yes, especially the Lord's toenails. At our temple in Ljubljana, Slovenia, it took me a long time to figure out how to pronounce Ljubljana. It's spelled Ljubljana. So that's how it's spelled, Ljubljana, but you pronounce it Ljubljana. We have two huge three-dimensional pictures on the wall. One of Krishna's lotus feet and one of Radharani's lotus feet. And I often wonder when guests come in, they walk into a temple and there's these big pictures of feet on the wall. What they must think. But just to meditate on Krishna's toenails, they're so bright. There's some descriptions that when Krishna puts his feet on a footrest that's made of multicolored jewels, that the light from his toenails, you don't see the different colors of the jewels anymore. They're so bright. And of course we have this story of Vamana, Padanakanira Danita Janapavana, that when he steps across the whole universe, his toenails pierce the coverings of the universe. And the Ganges water, Mother Ganga, she comes through that hole into the universe. And this is indeed the next verse that Lord Kapila says. The blessed Lord Shiva becomes all the more blessed by bearing on his head the holy waters of the Ganges, which has its source in the water that washed the Lord's lotus feet. The Lord's feet act like thunderbolts, hurled to shatter the mountain of sin stored in the mind of the meditating devotee. One should therefore meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord for a long time. All right, a mountain of sin. Who here has ever done something they knew was wrong? Anybody ever done something that they knew was wrong? Some of you never have done anything that you knew was wrong. All right, we'll talk to you later. Do we have a tendency to do things that we know are wrong? Anyone here have a tendency to do things that they know are wrong? All right, so that sin basically means something that's against truth. That's basically what it means. I always give the example, if you try to walk through the wall instead of the door, you're going to feel pain because you're not supposed to walk through walls. Now, that doesn't mean that the architect and the builders designed walls to hurt you. They didn't say, I'm going to put a wall here so people will bang their head. It's not like that, right? That's not. So it's not that Krishna has designed the world to cause us pain. But if we try to walk through walls instead of doors, we will suffer. And sin means doing something that's against reality, that's against truth. But we're strange when we're conquered by the modes of material nature, and we have an inclination to do this. Just like a little child likes to do naughty things just for the sake of doing naughty things. If any of you can remember when you were very young, or if you know any very young children. I used to like to stuff tissues and toys into the humidifier when I was 2 years old, so it would stop the water vapor from coming out. I like to keep putting things in there until no more water vapor came out. And my father would come. He thought I didn't know what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. And he would come and say, all right, Edie, don't put the tissues in the humidifier. And he'd show me how he had to open it up and clean it out. And he would be really patient and really loving. And he'd say, don't put your toys and tissue paper in there anymore, okay? Okay, Daddy. And then I would watch until he went into another room, and then I would put stuff back. I remember it very clearly. Or, little children will take a garbage can and dump it out. They'll dump everything on the floor just to be contrary. So we have that tendency as conditioned souls that we want to do things we know are wrong, just to be contrary. And this mountain of sin is all of these things we've done in the past that have reactions coming that we haven't yet experienced. And this mountain of sin is also this tendency to do things that we know are wrong. We know we're going to suffer. I mean, it can be as simple a thing as, eating that third piece of cake, and we know we're going to suffer. And we do it anyway. And they're like, why do I do this? A friend just wrote me this morning, I wrote an email, and sent an email. My husband told me not to send, and now I'm scared. This tendency to do this. And we know we're going to suffer, and in fact, we do suffer. So this is like this big mountain of doing things we know we shouldn't do and that we know we're going to regret, and we end up regretting. So how are we going to smash this tendency? What smashes it? What did Lord Kapila Dev say? If we meditate on Krishna's lotus feet. And what do those lotus feet act like? Is everybody really tired after the festival yesterday? I don't know. What did you say? All right, so let's read this. They act like thunderbolts. Right? A lightning. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen at least a video or a picture of lightning smashing a tree. Lightning can also smash even a mountain. So even though we may feel we have this mountain, right, of this tendency to do things we know are not in our best interest, that can be smashed by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. And therefore, Lord Kapila Dev says we should meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord for a very long time. Then he says the yogi should fix in his heart the activities of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, who is worshipped by all demigods and is the mother of the Supreme Person Brahma. She can always be found massaging the legs and thighs of the transcendental Lord, very carefully serving him in this way. So this concept of meditating on both the Lord and the Lord's devotee is the stimulus for love of God. As Rupa Goswami explains, Krishna is the Vishaya, he's the object of our love, and the devotee who's loving Krishna is the Ashraya, the shelter of our love. So one meditates on how the Lord's beloved devotee is serving his feet and thighs. Next, the yogi should fix his mind in meditation on the personality of Godhead's thighs, the storehouse of all energy. Wow, what a meditation is that? I mean, if we think about ourselves, when you feel energetic, do you walk fast, powered by your thighs? Yes? So the Lord's thighs are the storehouse of all energy. The Lord's thighs are whitish blue, like the luster of the linseed flower, and appear most graceful when the Lord is carried on the shoulders of Garuda. So the Lord sometimes sits on Garuda and often stands on Garuda. So this is another picture to meditate on. We have this picture of the Lord's toenails as being what again? Rubies. Right? And what do they dissipate? Their light dissipates the gloom in our heart. If you ever feel gloomy all the time, well, you got to get those toenails there in your heart. All right, and then we have the Lord's feet that act like thunderbolts. Right? So whenever we're inclined, I think I'm going to do that thing. I know I'm going to regret it. I've regretted it before, but I think I want to do that. I think I want to say that. So meditate on the Lord's feet that are like lightning bolts, and on Lakshmi massaging his feet. And we can meditate on the Lord's thighs as the storehouse of all energy as he rides on Garuda. Also, the yogi should contemplate his rounded hips, which are encircled by a girdle. Girdle means like a big sash. It doesn't mean like girdles women wear to make themselves artificially look skinny. That rests on the exquisite yellow silk cloth that extends down to his ankles. So the Lord has a yellow cloth, and then he has this sash. So that's a description of these parts of the Lord, of Narayana. I wanted to go to descriptions of these parts of the Lord's form as Krishna. Of course, Krishna and Narayan are the same person, but it's a different form in a different mood. So this is from Krishna Konaika Kaumudi. Shama has raised rounded buttocks. His hips are bound by a golden belt of bells. So we have the description of a sash, and we also have the description of a belt of bells, which emanates a garland of sparkling light rays and conquers the best of Venas with its tinkling sound. So as Krishna's moving, the bells on his hips are making music better than Ravi Shankar can play the sitar. Who would not become greedy on seeing the breadth, thickness, power, and dark complexion of his thighs, which surpass Brahma's creation of the banana trunk? Krishna's knees, which are neither bony nor too prominent, are graceful, muscular, rounded, and more gorgeous than the brilliant treasure chest of Cupid. Who could walk away from Krishna after seeing his slender shanks, which narrow gracefully below his knees like the flow of the sweetest honey? Krishna's calf muscles are a bubbling ocean of rasa, two play balls of Cupid, and more beautiful than kadamba blossoms. Krishna's attractive feet spread out like streams from a river of sweetness and bestow the supreme happiness. They reflect the luster of lotuses, are tinted the color of rubies, ornamented with the sparkling glow of his toenails, and marked with the attractive symbols of a flag, lotus, barleycorn, and elephant goad. In this way, Vrajendanandana bestows the topmost limits of whatever his devotees desire, and Krishna completely destroys the pride of other youth's beauty as he enjoys his pastimes in Vrindavan. And I want to also read from Govinda Lilamrita. This is chapter 16, verses 20 to 35. Krishna's smooth, rounded ankles, raised by waves of beauty, are like buds of blue lotuses, half rising above the small ripples of the Yamuna River. Licking once the beautiful tumbala leaf cups of his ankles full of grace and honey, with the tip of the tongue in the form of the eyes, the sporting bee constantly staggers around, intoxicated in the vicinity. Above Krishna's lotus feet, there are two ripe karam adaka fruits in the guise of ankles to nourish the parrots of Radha's eyes. Krishna's ankles with compact sides have become small balls with which Radha's friend, her mind, plays. Krishna's shanks are like Cupid's small clubs made of tamala wood for destroying the excellent self-control of Gokula's young women. His shanks defeat the beauty of banana stems made of emerald as the pillars of the house of the three worlds. May those shanks, sapphire stakes to subdue the elephant hearts of the gopis, destroy all our sins. His shanks shine like the waves of sweet beauty, with the sound of his ankle bells, like the chortling of swans at their edges, like small streams of water flowing from the Yamuna of his bodily effulgence. Seeing each's beauty, his two greedy shanks desires to meet each other. When he plays his flute with motionless body, they remain embracing each other for a long time. Krishna's knees are the sitting place of the goddess of sweetness, like strong joints in the creeper of charm, like two jewel caskets holding a wealth of beauty. Krishna's knees are like two treasure chests made of sapphire, but amazingly enough, they can hold all the Chintamani hearts of the women of Vraja. May Krishna's two attractive knees, strong and fleshy, caressed by Radha's hands, which, when bending or straightening his feet, have no wrinkles, be our wealth. Krishna's thighs are massive, well-shaped, attractive, smooth, and tapered at the bottom. They are the dancing floor for a host of cupids. May these two thighs, playgrounds of beauty, shine in our hearts. Are these two pillars made of hard sapphires for supporting Brahma's universe? Or are these two sacrificial posts of Cupid, or two posts to tie up the elephant hearts of young women? No, they are Krishna's two thighs. His thighs are like two inverted banana trunks made of sapphire, growing from raised ground on the excellent mountain of his hips, for nourishing the parrot eyes of the girls with their sweet fruit. The shape of his thighs defeat the pride of banana stalks and their flexibility defeats the pride of mad elephants' trunks. How can poets compare these thighs with anything in the world? How enchanting are Krishna's firm, broad, and well-shaped hips, which are the dancing arena for millions of cupids, with his wives Rati, and alluring for the well-bred cowherd. Now, if we think any of this is way too elevated for us, we have the form of the deity in front of us, and we are supposed to be meditating on his form. But even as we go out and about in the world, if we look at the Bhagavatam 8:20-23, there it's described that in the universal form, the souls are the lower planets, the souls of Krishna's feet. We look out at the stars. We're so fortunate here we can see so many of the stars. Some of those planets, they're on the bottom of Krishna's feet. The earth's surface itself is the top of Krishna's feet. The mountains are Krishna's calves. The birds are on Krishna's knees. And all varieties of air are within his thighs. When we are breathing the air, we can remember the description of Krishna's thighs. When we hear and see the birds, we can remember the description of Krishna's knees. When we see mountains or hills, we can remember the descriptions of Krishna's calves. When we walk on the earth, we can remember the description of Krishna's feet. When we look at the stars, we can remember the description of the souls of Krishna's feet. And this is how we come to know God and to love him. We may have the highest philosophy and theology, but then we also have to use it. It's not just a book we have on our shelf that we can point to and say, look there, we have the highest philosophy. But we actually have to live our lives so that we come to know God and to love him. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.